In this video, we are going to see what is VLAN trunking protocol (VTP).
Imagine you're using more than 50 VLANs in your enterprise network, and these VLANs span across 5 switches. You would need to log into each of these switches and create those VLANs manually. Now I'm thinking you won't be happy about this, and I agree, doing this manually is just too big of a task. So to minimize misconfiguration and configuration inconsistencies of VLANs in your network, use the VLAN trunking protocol. VTP is a protocol that facilitates the management of VLANs across several switches in the network. Using VTP basically makes your life easier. You don't need to log into each switch to create and name each VLAN manually. Also, if you're used to manually managing VLANs on each switch in your network, well, that works well for a few switches, but VTP is a better solution for a larger network. So let's take a look at how VTP actually works. A VTP domain consists of one switch or several interconnected switches sharing the same VTP environment. A switch can belong to only one domain. By default, a Cisco switch is in the no management domain state until it receives an advertisement for a domain over a trunk link or until you configure a management domain. The beauty of this protocol is that any VLANs that are created on a switch and configured on a VTP server, those VLANs are propagated across trunk links to all the connected switches in a network. A very important thing to remember here is that you still need to assign ports to each VLAN. VTP advertisements are flooded throughout a network. They are sent every 5 minutes, or basically whenever there's a change in the VLAN configuration. The default VTP version that's enabled on a Cisco switch is version 1. But remember, 3 different VTP versions exist: 1, 2, and 3. You can change the switch to run VTP version 2 or 3, but these versions are not compatible. You need to configure the same VTP version on every switch in the domain. VTP operates in one of 3 modes: server, transparent, or client. The default VTP mode is server mode, but then VLANs are not propagated over the network until a VTP management domain name is specified or learned. So when you make a change, like create, modify, or delete, it's reflected in the VLAN configuration on a VTP server, and this change is propagated to all the switches in the VTP domain. So VTP messages are transmitted out all the trunk connections. We also have to mention that a VTP server synchronizes its VLAN database file with all the other VTP servers and clients. So like we said, it's the default mode. On the other hand, when in VTP client mode, you can't change the VLAN configuration. If you want to make VLAN changes on a switch and propagate these changes, you can't make them happen in this mode. The switch would need to be in VTP server mode. But if we go back to the client mode, well, the VTP client can send many VLANs that are currently listed in the database to other VTP switches. VTP advertisements are forwarded in the VTP client mode. Also, just like in VTP server mode, the VTP client synchronizes its VLAN database with other VTP servers and clients. Let's go back to the third mode, which is kind of a special mode, and that's the VTP transparent mode. Now, when you change the VLAN configuration in VTP transparent mode, the change affects only the local switch, and it doesn't propagate to other switches in the VTP domain. VTP transparent mode forwards VTP advertisements that it receives within the domain. A VTP transparent device doesn't synchronize its database with any other device. So we could say that a switch in the transparent mode doesn't affect the VLAN configuration in your VTP domain. But then, it will pass on VTP advertisements if it receives any. Now let's discuss the default VTP configuration values. By default, you don't have a VTP domain configured and there's no VTP password set. So the VTP domain can be specified or learned. And you can set a password for the VTP management domain, but there's a catch. If you don't assign the same password for every switch in the domain, VTP won't function properly. So we said the default VTP mode is server and the default version is 1. Like you see in this example, you can change the VTP mode, VTP domain, and VTP password using the VTP global configuration mode command. Ideally, at the end of the day, you would have one VTP server switch where all the VLAN configuration changes will be performed. All other switches, the ones that are configured as VTP clients, those switches will synchronize their VLAN databases with any VLAN changes that are performed at the VTP server. Don't forget, after VLAN information gets updated on the clients from the server, you still need to assign ports to each VLAN.